Hello, this is Dr. Lucasz Kowalczyk, founder and CEO of ProSchedule. Welcome back to our ongoing series, COVID-19, Your Readiness and Assessment Plans. If you missed our previous two articles, please click the links below to get caught up. This week, we're going to be focusing on scheduling elective surgeries in a state where there is a restriction on performing elective surgeries because of COVID-19. The first question is, why have an elective surgery restriction in the first place? The simple answer to this question is it's meant to be able to preserve personal protective equipment for frontline healthcare workers and staff. In these situations, especially as one as unprecedented as this one, we need to be able to make sure that personal protective equipment is going to the people that need it the most. Before I dive too far into this week's article, I want to send another huge thank you to all of our frontline healthcare workers and staff battling COVID-19. It is an absolute privilege to be working alongside of you and seeing the amazing dedication and perseverance you're showing to keep our communities as safe and as healthy as possible. In this week's article, the topics will be knowing your state criteria for performing elective surgeries during a restricted period, developing a clinical pathway, communicating that clinical pathway to stakeholders, your screening process, and then finally, the day of surgery for scheduled cases. So let's jump right in. Your first priority is understanding the language and criteria that your state has issued regarding elective surgeries and how they are restricted. Now, this will be a state-by-state case. As of April 8th, there were about 35 states with elective surgery restrictions. And if you're one of those states, go ahead and look up the state-issued order on what this restriction specifically entails. For my state of Colorado, there are about 5 criteria. The first criteria is the surgery cannot be delayed for more than 3 months. The other criteria include imminent loss of life, limb, or permanent dysfunction of the organ. The last criteria is that there's a risk that a malignant process will progress to a higher stage. And so those are the criteria that we are working in within Colorado to be able to schedule an elective surgical case. The other criteria that you'll also need to know is to make sure that you have all the necessary personal protective equipment to actually perform the case in a safe and compliant manner. Once you know this order and the language in it, you're going to be ready to move on to the next phase, which is developing your clinical pathway. And the first and most important part of this is getting your relevant stakeholders together. And you'll iron out the process of what cases you'll be able to do and schedule. One thing that will be really important here is to make sure that you list the statute in the clinical pathway. That way, if your ambulatory surgical center gets audited for cases done during the restriction, you'll have the state ordered clearly outlined and cited as a key criteria for your scheduling process. This will be really important for you. One major caveat that I would like to make here is that I would recommend making sure to seek the advice of legal counsel. I am certainly not a lawyer. It will be important for you to make sure that you're interpreting this language correctly and that a lawyer reviews this to make sure that it is all compliant. Your next step will be communicating your scheduling criteria with your staff, physicians, and physicians' offices. So first, let's start with your staff. Make sure that they understand the scheduling criteria, the pathway, and that these cases will fall within the guidelines that are needed, and that your staff will have all necessary equipment to safely perform this procedure. Next up are physicians and physicians' offices. Send a copy of your scheduling pathway to those offices and to the scheduling department so it's very clear what criteria will need to be met in order to schedule a case at your facility. Your screening process is next. It will be much easier for you to filter out cases if they have that block of text that you sent out stating the specific criteria within the state order that justifies scheduling this procedure. So that should make it easy to pick out the cases that are appropriate. The difficulty will be managing disputes or turning away cases. But come up with a clear dispute mechanism here. And once again, please involve legal counsel here. So you know your state order and its criteria for scheduling cases. You've developed a pathway, you've communicated to stakeholders, and you've screened cases appropriately. You're finally ready to do a scheduled case. What's your checklist for that day? Number one, communicate clearly with staff and physicians. Make sure that it is very clear on why this case is being put on the schedule and how it falls within the specific criteria. Number two, make sure that you have all personal protective equipment in order to do this case safely, to keep your staff and physicians safe, and your patients safe. Finally, make sure that you're following all recommended social distancing guidelines. So I think that provides a fairly comprehensive process and checklist on what needs to be done in order to safely schedule an elective surgery in a state that has restrictions on elective surgeries related to COVID-19. We look forward to your feedback and to hearing from you. Please connect with us via our website and via LinkedIn. And as always, thank you for all that you're doing for your own local community, providing healthcare in a most urgent and needed time, and keeping your community, your friends and family as safe as possible. Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you. Best of luck.